When I think of self-advocacy, a lot of times the first thing that comes to mind, honestly, is solidarity. Do you guys know what solidarity is?
What's that again?
So solidarity is, I wrote this down. Okay, so it's unity, right? It's basically unity, agreement, and it's based on an action or a common interest generally, right? So if there's a common interest that you have, for example, all of you being in this particular class together, talking about similar experiences that you have, talking about, maybe your disabilities within this particular space, how it's seen, how you've had to fight back, you know what I'm saying, together, and building that unity around that one common cause, building that unity and that agreement around one common cause. Does that make sense? And so when I think of self-advocacy, I feel like these two go hand in hand. Because if, for example, Nick, you get up here and you start talking about your personal experiences, maybe some things that you've experienced, specifically here at UCCS, and maybe you felt like you weren't treated fairly in whatever kind of way. I know that you guys have been working really hard on graduation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I read that article, Nick. No, it was beautiful, and it was great. It was great.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And so, telling that story and then putting it out there and then getting 6,000 people to sign a petition and be like, you know what? Either I recognize and have felt that before, or I see that this is wrong. And I'm going to come together in unity with you against this particular cause. Or for this particular cause. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so telling your story, advocating for yourself inspires other people that feel like, maybe they were too afraid to say something before. Maybe they were too afraid to even recognize it themselves. And then when you speak up, all of a sudden they realize, you know what, I'm not alone actually in this. And if I'm not alone in this, that means that I can build power with other people. I can have solidarity with other people for this particular cause. Does that make sense, y'all? So self-advocacy is all about solidarity. It's all about telling that story and inspiring other people to tell their own story, all right? And then when you build that power within yourselves, and then you build that power within a group, then that's how you start a movement. Cool?
Cool.
So you're starting a movement,
Yeah, I got to do
all right? And it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. So what I wanted to do real quick is show you guys a video of a young man that is a poet like me, and I'm gonna let him tell his story himself. But when I saw his piece, when I saw him tell his story, actually, first of all, and then I saw his piece, it really inspired me, because as a Black woman in this world, as a Black gay woman in this world, there wasn't a lot of representation growing up. Right? I didn't really have a lot of Black or brown teachers. There weren't people that had the same experiences as me. There weren't people that were called the same names as I was as a Black woman in this world. And, there weren't the same stigmas attached. There was a lot of people that thought that I was not smart enough to make it to a certain school because of the color of my skin. There were a lot of people that assumed that I was either a thug or a gangster because I used to walk around and hang out with other Black people in certain spaces, and they would assume, right, that because of the color of my skin and because of the picture that has been painted over time historically, that I was a criminal. And I had to live with that my entire life. And, especially, like I said, being gay, there's a lot of other things that came with that, specifically from my family. And I had to live with that my entire life. I'm still living with these things today. But then I walk into spaces where I see powerful, beautiful, elegant, graceful Black and brown people. And I'm just like, wait, I can do anything. I can do absolutely anything. Like, the sky is not the limit, it's the limitation. I can break through anything and be anything. And it was because of them telling their stories that I felt inspired to tell my own. And this particular piece right here definitely inspired me in another way, and I'm hoping that it inspires you as well. So let's check it out.
I remember walking down to the end of my street, having to catch the bus, and it being a short bus. First label I was given was that I was neurologically impaired. Then after that, I was placed completely into special education. I remember immediately feeling like my life had changed. I had to walk into the building and go to a classroom that was all the way at the end of the hallway. I was also conscious that I was in a segregated setting. Everything that spoke to me about my experience said that I was lesser than everyone else. It just began to just sort of work away at my self-esteem. I very quickly began to think of myself as being stupid. My name is Laderick Horn. I am a poet, a speaker, and an advocate, and I have learning and attention issues that affect my ability to spell, to read, as well as do calculations. I remember sitting in the living room, my mother trying to teach me the alphabet, and me trying to convince her vigorously that I knew what the alphabet was. And I would sing the alphabet song. And I said, there, that's the alphabet. It was a sound to me. And I remember her taking a legal pad, writing a symbol on the pad in big dark letters, turning it to me and saying, what letter is this? And I had no idea. She said, you do not know the alphabet. The first word that I learned to spell on my own was fresh. And the only reason I was able to spell the word fresh is because there was a song on the radio at the time, and the hook was F-R-E-S-H, fresh, 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 that's fresh. F-R-E-S-H, fresh, 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 yo, that's fresh. It used this mnemonic of rhyme and rhythm, and my brain locked onto it, right? Every other way that everyone else had tried to get me to spell a word was just like paper and lists and just sort of cram it in. But then these MCs showed up on the radio and gave me this little gift. By the time I got to first grade, it was clear that I was not able to perform as well as the other students. I ended up getting tested and evaluated. I'm a part of the first generation to pass through what we now refer to as special education. We're coming out of the 70s, we're coming out of the disability rights movement, and special education was still a relatively new thing. So a lot of these labels were, people were trying to figure them out. And if I was in a different district, maybe I would have been called dyslexic. I never caught up with reading in high school. I wasn't getting a lot of support. It was just like one special ed class after another. The closer I got to graduation, the more I had the more I began to think about what life was going to be like for me as an adult. The winter of my junior year of high school, facing senior year, facing graduation, I just got filled with a lot of fear and a lot of depression. I needed to just pause and reevaluate who I was. One of the things that I noticed early on was that the vast majority of the folks who were in special ed were young black boys, people of color, right? I began to get very aware of what it meant to be a person of color, a black man in America. And it was almost at the same time that I was wrestling with a lot of these self-esteem issues associated with being in special ed and having a disability. I remember trying to read Einstein's theory of relativity and not understanding any of the math, but understanding enough of it where I realized that point of view was important, and that a big part of what I needed to do was to shift the point of view that I had about who I was as a student, about what my value was in the larger society. I came out of that really dark place with just this understanding and this deeply held belief that I was not flawed, that I wasn't broken, that I wasn't a mistake. And also realizing, and I had a great mind, and that I could have a future. I remember rolling up into my next IEP meeting and just kind of telling the team, I'm going to college. Let's figure out how to make that work. What changed my life when I went to college was that I was a part of a support program specifically designed to support students with learning and attention issues. I'd been in special ed for many, many years, surrounded by people with learning and attention issues and other kinds of disabilities, but nobody talked about it. It was like a dirty secret. I showed up on campus the first day for an orientation, and they were like, no, we're going to talk about being LD. We're going to talk about learning and attention issues. And we spent days just talking about it. It was just this open conversation, and we were laughing. We were joking about some of the things that were embarrassing. Also, having a counselor. She sat me down and she just walked me through all my documentation and explained to me what all that stuff meant, right? And I remember being proud to hear things like in all these tests I scored really well, and it was clear that I was smart and talented and all these sort of things. And I remember Susan, my counselor Susan, turning to me and saying, stop worrying about spelling, just write whatever you want. And then we'll figure the spelling and the grammar, we'll figure that out down the line. I began staying up all night writing. I remember having all these papers and walking into Susan's office and saying, Susan, I think I might be a poet. And in the evenings, I would go to open mics and I would perform. And then I got connected to this community of artists. I got known as a writer. I was a poet with a learning disability. I was a poet that couldn't spell.
Back in time, you could find cats like me snacking on knowledge-filled fruits in the Garden of Eden. But instead, I made my bed in a garden state on the east coast of a country that is mine because my ancestors helped build it with blood, sweat, and tears. Their daily fears still be my everyday reality. Never got caught up in that emancipation or you free now fallacy because I too have been systematically institutionalized to rely on everything, and I do mean everything, except for myself.
You realize that you're not alone, right? Like I went through school feeling a lot of isolation, and what really made the difference to me was being able to connect with people who had similar minds to mine. The other piece of advice that I have for young people is just the power of understanding how your mind works, right?
And so I dare you to judge yourselves by a different standard, to lift as you climb, and to fight like gladiators to become master and commander of your own beautiful minds. But above all else, I dare you to dream.
Any thoughts?
He was basically saying that you can, as long as you set your mind to something that you want to do in life, go for it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what people are saying that you can't do it.
Yeah.
You can do it. You just might be doing it in a different way than others are doing it.
Absolutely. I mean, and when he was talking about specifically just understanding how your mind works, because nobody in here is has the same exact skill set or talent as the next person, right? Every single one of us, we're like a fingerprint. What do you guys know about a fingerprint? Every single person is different. There's only one like it in the entire world, in all of existence. There's only one you. And what I love to tell people is that your perspective, because the fact that you're shaped by your experiences, the fact that no one will walk through life the way that you did and will perceive your life the way that you did and will carry out your life the way that you do. No one will do that, right? That makes that your superpower. That perspective that you have in this world. And when you walk through life like nobody else, that is your superpower. And so you have to own that. You have to own that when you know that there's nobody like you, nobody could be like you, and that's a beautiful thing. Nobody can be like Carrie Joy. Nobody can be like Nick Ray. And that's a beautiful thing, right? Yeah. And all of your brilliance, everything that you bring to the table, that's your superpower. Does that make sense, y'all?
Absolutely.
All right, so with that said, there was a poem that he was presenting that I wanted to share the full poem with you guys, all right? It's called Dare to Dream.